If you think the declined card meant I was broke, you're wrong. I was just done covering for people who hit me, stole from me, and called it love. Stick around till the end, because this time, the bill they'll get won't come from me. It'll come from the IRS. Oh, let me tell you, the memory still burns, sitting by the kitchen at my own stepsister's birthday dinner after I'd just paid the entire restaurant bill. And the moment my card dared to decline, he actually backhanded me, like I was nothing, right there in front of strangers, in front of her. But what they didn't know, this wasn't the broke girl at the table. This was the silent owner of all their debt, and that night, I was done playing the good daughter. My name is Lena Walsh, I'm 33, and I work as a financial manager at Summit & Crew. You've probably never heard of us, but we move half the consumer goods in the Northeast. I'm good at my job, great actually. Numbers, they just make sense to me in a way people never have. Maybe that's why I didn't see this coming, even though the math had been staring me in the face for years. The restaurant was called the Sterling Room. One of those trendy places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs that charges $30 for a burger. It was Tessa's 18th birthday, and my mother, of course, insisted on something special for our baby girl. And naturally, when the check came, it would land in front of me. It always did. I got there 15 minutes early, wearing my best navy blue sheath dress, the one I saved for client meetings. The hostess led me to our reserved table, and immediately I saw my seat. The chair by the kitchen door, tucked away behind a decorative column, the wobbly one where servers would brush past me all evening with their heavy trays. "Lena's here," my mother announced when she arrived with Robert and Tessa. As if my presence was both expected and vaguely disappointing. She air-kissed somewhere near my left ear, careful not to smudge her lipstick. Robert didn't even acknowledge me. He pulled out chairs for my mother and Tessa, then settled himself at the head of the table like a king surveying his domain. He'd put on weight, his belly straining against his polo shirt, a shirt I'd probably paid for indirectly through one of their emergencies. Tessa, I have to admit, looked beautiful. Her blonde hair was curled, pinned up, and she wore a pink dress that made her look older than 18. She gave me a small smile, the kind you give a distant relative at a funeral, then immediately turned to show her boyfriend something on her phone. The boyfriend, Tyler or Taylor or something with a T, sat next to her, all jaw and no conversation. Tessa's friends filled the remaining seats, Madison, Brittany, and another blonde whose name I never caught. They chattered about college applications and spring break, while I, the ever-practical Lena, just studied the menu, calculating what this night would really cost me. "Order whatever you want," I heard myself say when the server arrived. "It's a special night." The words just came out automatically, programmed by years of conditioning. Tessa beamed and ordered the lobster. Of course she did. Robert went for the ribeye, well done with extra butter. My mother chose the salmon, but could you make sure there's no oil? I'm watching my figure. I ordered a Caesar salad. Just that. "You're not on another one of your diets, are you?" My mother's voice carried that familiar note of judgment. "Just not that hungry," I lied. The truth was, I'd already done the math. With drinks and dessert, we were looking at close to $800. My checking account had $1,200. Rent was due in 5 days. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Tessa's friends gushed about her acceptance to State University, early admission, they emphasized, as if I hadn't written her application essays. Robert told the same story about his glory days playing high school football, the one where the details changed each time, but he always scored the winning touchdown. My mother laughed too loudly at something Madison's mother had posted on Facebook. Nobody asked about my promotion. Nobody asked about the conference I'd presented at last month. Nobody asked about anything at all. When the food arrived, I watched them eat. Tessa took photos of every dish for her Instagram. Robert complained his steak wasn't hot enough and sent it back. My mother picked at her salmon and pushed half of it away, declaring herself stuffed after 5 bites. "So, Lena," Brittany suddenly addressed me, probably out of politeness more than interest. "Tessa says you work with money, financial management?" I nodded. "Corporate logistics." "That sounds boring," she giggled, and the others joined in. "Someone has to pay for dinners like this," I said quietly. The words slipped out before I could stop them. The table went silent for a moment. Robert's fork paused midway to his mouth. My mother's smile tightened at the corners. Then Tessa laughed, a bright, dismissive sound, and the moment passed. She's always been practical, my mother explained to the girls, as if practicality was a character flaw. Even as a child, always counting her pennies. They ordered dessert. A massive chocolate cake appeared with 18 candles, and the entire restaurant sang. I smiled and clapped along. The good daughter, the reliable one, the one who could always be counted on to pick up the check. When the server brought the leather folder, he placed it directly in front of me without asking. They all knew. Everyone at this table knew exactly how this would go. I slipped my credit card inside without even looking at the total. A few minutes later, the server returned. He leaned close to my ear, speaking quietly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the card was declined. Do you have another form of payment?" The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Every single face at the table turned toward me. Tessa's friends exchanged glances. My mother's mouth formed a small O of surprise that was entirely performative. But it was Robert's reaction that I'll never forget. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. His face had turned that particular shade of red I remembered from my teenage years, the color that meant someone was about to pay for his embarrassment. He walked around the table with deliberate steps, and I knew what was coming before his hand even moved. The slap wasn't as hard as it could have been. Robert was always careful about leaving marks that might raise questions. But in that quiet restaurant, it sounded like a gunshot. My cheek stung, and I tasted copper where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. "You stupid, useless bitch," he hissed. "You can't even do this one simple thing after everything we've done for you." The restaurant had gone completely silent. I could feel every eye on us. A woman at the next table had her phone out, probably recording. Tessa wasn't laughing anymore. She was looking at her plate, her birthday tiara slightly askew. I stood up carefully, my legs steadier than I'd expected. I pulled my backup card from my wallet, the emergency visa I kept for actual emergencies, and handed it to the horrified server. "Run this one," I said, calmly. "It'll work." As I waited for him to return, I looked around the table one last time. My mother was fussing with her napkin, refusing to meet my eyes. Robert had returned to his seat, muttering about ungrateful children and constant disappointments. Tessa's friends were all suddenly fascinated by their phones. But Tessa herself was looking at me now. And for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Not sympathy exactly. Maybe recognition. Maybe she was finally old enough to understand what her birthday dinners had cost me, in every sense of the word. The server returned with my card and receipt. I added a 40% tip. He didn't deserve to suffer for our family drama. I signed my name with a steady hand. "Happy birthday, Tessa," I said. Then I walked out of the Sterling room, past the hostess stand, past the valet station, into the cool April night. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my car. Text after text, call after call. I didn't need to look to know what they said. But as I sat in the driver's seat, my cheeks still throbbing, something had finally shifted inside me. They thought the declined card meant I was broke. They thought they'd finally drained me dry. But they were wrong. That card had been declined because Robert had opened a supplementary account in my name 3 days ago, maxing it out before I'd even known it existed. I knew because I'd seen the notification that afternoon. I'd chosen not to transfer money to cover it. I'd wanted to see what would happen. Now I knew. And now, finally, I was done. I sat in my car for 20 minutes that night, engine off, just breathing. My phone lit up the darkness like a desperate lighthouse. 37 missed calls, 53 texts. I finally turned it face down and drove home in silence. To understand why I stayed so long, why I kept paying, you have to understand how it started. I was 11 when my mother met Robert at a conference for medical supply sales. She was a receptionist. He was a regional manager who wore too much cologne and laughed too loud at his own jokes. My father had left 3 years earlier, just walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. No explanation, no forwarding address, no child support. My mother never recovered from the abandonment. She wore her desperation like perfume, and Robert could smell it from across a crowded room. They married quickly in a courthouse ceremony where I was the only witness. I wore my Easter dress from 2 years before, the hem hitting awkwardly at midcalf. Robert didn't have any family there. They're all back in Ohio, he said, though I later learned he'd grown up in New Jersey. At first, he tried to win me over. Ice cream trips, movie tickets, the occasional, "How was school, kiddo?" But when I didn't immediately warm to him, when I didn't call him Dad or laugh at his jokes or pretend he belonged in our small apartment, his interest curdled into something else. "She's a bit cold, isn't she?" I heard him tell my mother one night. "Not very affectionate." "She's shy," my mother defended weakly. "She'll warm up." But I didn't warm up. And by the time I turned 14, Robert had stopped trying. I became furniture in my own home. Something to work around, occasionally useful, mostly ignored. When Tessa was born, I thought things might improve. A baby could soften anyone, right? Wrong. Tessa's arrival only crystallized my position in the family hierarchy. She was the real daughter, the wanted one, the fresh start. I was the reminder of my mother's failed first marriage, the sullen teenager who didn't fit the family portrait Robert wanted to project. "Lena, watch the baby while we go to dinner." "Lena, Tessa needs a diaper change." "Lena, why is she crying? You must have done something." I became an unpaid nanny, expected to be grateful for the privilege. When I started working at 15, bagging groceries at the local supermarket, Robert decided my paychecks were family contributions. "Room and board aren't free," he'd say, holding out his hand every Friday. "About time you learned that." My mother said nothing. She'd perfected the art of selective blindness by then, floating through life on a cloud of white wine and willful ignorance. As long as Robert stayed, as long as she wasn't alone again, she could pretend everything was fine. I saved what I could, hiding cash in a tampon box under my sink. $20 here, $30 there. It took 2 years to accumulate enough for college application fees. When my acceptance letter came from State University with a partial scholarship for academic merit, Robert's first words were, "How are you planning to pay for the rest?" "Student loans." "Work-study," I said. "I've got it figured out." "Loans," he laughed. "In this economy, you'll be paying those off until you're 50. Better to skip the whole thing. I can get you full-time at my buddy's warehouse." But I went anyway, surviving on ramen and determination. I majored in finance because I never wanted to be financially vulnerable again. I wanted to understand money, how to make it, keep it, grow it. How to never end up like my mother, dependent on a man who treated kindness like currency. During college, the requests started as emergencies. My mother would call, voice trembling. "The car broke down and Robert's between jobs. Just this once, we'll pay you back." Then, "Tessa needs braces. Insurance won't cover all of it. You understand, don't you?" And the landlord's threatening eviction. "Robert's commission check is late. Just until Friday, I promise." The promises were as empty as my bank account became, but I kept sending money because the alternative, letting my baby sister suffer for our parents' failures, felt worse than my own hunger pangs. After graduation, I got the job at Summit and Crew, entry level, but with a clear path upward. I moved into a studio apartment 40 minutes from my childhood home, far enough to feel like escape, close enough that my mother could still reach me with her guilt. The pattern solidified. I'd build up savings, then drain them for a family crisis. Robert's job losses became suspiciously regular, always right when rent was due. My mother developed mystery illnesses that required expensive treatments insurance wouldn't cover. Tessa, sweet, spoiled Tessa, always needed something, for school, for dance, for the endless activities that would look good on college applications. "You don't have kids," my mother would remind me during our weekly calls. "You don't understand the expenses. And you're doing so well now. It's what family does." What family does, as if family was a one-way street where I gave and they took, where my success was communal property, but my struggles were mine alone. I started keeping a spreadsheet. Not out of resentment at first, just habit. I tracked everything in spreadsheets. But as the numbers grew, As $50 became $500, became $5,000, became more than I wanted to acknowledge, the document became something else. Evidence. Proof that I wasn't imagining the imbalance. $2,400 for Robert's emergency dental work that turned out to be cosmetic veneers. $3,800 for Tessa's dance competition trips. $15,000 over 3 years for their rent when Robert was between opportunities. $4,500 for my mother's therapy that I later learned was spa retreats. The spreadsheet grew like a tumor. Each line item a small betrayal. But I kept paying because that's what good daughters did. Because Tessa was innocent in all of this. Because my mother would cry and say I was all she had. Because I didn't know how to stop. The thing about financial abuse is that it's so mundane. There's no dramatic music, no obvious villain twirling a mustache. Just a steady drain, like a leak in your roof that you keep meaning to fix, until one day you look up and realize the whole ceiling is about to collapse. By my 30th birthday, I was making good money. I'd been promoted twice, had my own office with a window, drove a reliable car. From the outside, I'd made it. Inside, I was hollow. Every raise meant more money for them to request. Every bonus became a family emergency waiting to happen. I dated occasionally, but how do you explain to someone that you can't go on vacation because your mother needs new kitchen cabinets? How do you admit that you're a successful professional who can't say no to people who barely acknowledge your existence until they need something? You'll understand when you have your own family, my mother said when I tried to set boundaries. Blood is blood. But Tessa wasn't my blood, not fully. And Robert certainly wasn't. Yet somehow, I'd become responsible for all of them. The family ATM that never ran empty. 3 months before Tessa's 18th birthday, I finally started therapy. Dr. Marcus, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes, listened to my story without judgment. "Why do you think you keep giving them money?" she asked during our 4th session. "Because they need it," I said automatically. Do they, or do they just want it? The question haunted me. Need versus want. Survival versus comfort. Love versus manipulation. What would happen if you said no? Dr. Marcus pressed gently. I couldn't answer because I'd never tried. The fear of their reaction, of being cast out completely, of proving Robert right that I was cold and unloving, it kept me compliant. But that night at the Sterling Room, with my cheeks stinging and the taste of blood in my mouth, I finally had my answer. Saying yes hadn't earned me love or respect or even basic kindness. It had only earned me a seat by the kitchen door and a slap when the well ran dry. They thought I was broke. Let them think it. The truth, that I had $47,000 in savings and excellent credit, would come out soon enough, but not in the way they expected. As I drove home that April night, I wasn't planning revenge yet. I was just done. Done pretending, done paying, done being the family safety net that everyone took for granted. But the universe has a funny way of showing you exactly who people are when you stop being useful to them. And my family was about to show me exactly who they'd always been. The call started at 6 a.m. the next morning. My mother had apparently spent the night crafting the perfect guilt campaign, and she launched it with military precision. Lena, honey, I'm so sorry about last night. Robert was just stressed about work. You know how he gets. But we need to talk about the bills. The mortgage is due Monday. And with your little stunt at dinner. I hung up. She called back immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Really disappointed in you after everything we've done. Raising you. Giving you a home. Tessa was in tears all night. On her birthday. How could you be so selfish? Delete. By noon, the messages had evolved from guilt to anger to outright manipulation. Robert left 3 voicemails threatening legal action for theft of services. Apparently, not paying for dinner constituted a crime in his mind. Tessa sent a series of texts alternating between wounded innocence, "I thought you loved me," and teenage nastiness. "Tyler says you're probably jealous because you're single and bitter." I turned off my phone and went to work. "You look terrible," my colleague Marcus observed when I walked into the Monday morning meeting. "Everything okay?" "Family stuff," I said, and he nodded knowingly. Everyone had family stuff. But my family stuff was about to become more complicated than I'd imagined. When I finally turned my phone back on Tuesday evening, I had 43 missed calls from my mother, 18 from Robert, and 1 from my credit card company. The credit card message was the one that mattered. This is regarding unusual activity on your account ending in 4458. Please call us immediately. I knew before I called what I'd find. The supplementary card Robert had opened, the one I discovered just before Tessa's dinner, was just the tip of the iceberg. As the patient representative walked me through the recent charges, a picture emerged that was both shocking and sickeningly predictable. $8,000 at a jewelry store the day before Tessa's birthday. $3,200 at Best Buy for what looked like an entire home entertainment system. $5,500 in cash advances. $2,100 at a high-end men's clothing store. All in the past 2 weeks. All on cards I didn't even know existed. We flagged these as potentially fraudulent, the representative said carefully. Would you like to dispute them? Yes, I said. All of them. And I need to check if there are any other accounts I don't know about. There were 3 credit cards, a personal line of credit, and this was the one that made my hands shake, an attempt to refinance my car that had only failed because they'd gotten my employment details wrong. 23 years of financial carefulness, of building perfect credit, of sacrificing and saving, and they'd tried to destroy it all in less than a month. I spent the rest of the week on the phone with banks, credit bureaus, and finally, a lawyer named Patricia Hernandez, who specialized in financial fraud. Family identity theft is more common than you'd think, Patricia said during our first meeting. She was in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I found comforting. It's also harder to prosecute because victims often refuse to press charges. They feel guilty. They make excuses. They enable. I'm done enabling, I said. Good. Then let's talk about your options. As Patricia outlined the legal process, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not for reconciliation. That ship had sailed the moment Robert's hand connected with my face, but for freedom. Real freedom. My mother, meanwhile, had moved to phase 3 of her campaign, recruiting flying monkeys. My phone buzzed with messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in years, all variations on the same theme. Your mom is worried sick. Family is everything. Don't you think you're overreacting? My favorite came from Aunt Helen, my mother's sister, who lived in Florida and had borrowed $3,000 from me 5 years ago for a medical emergency that turned out to be a facelift. Your mother says you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe you should see someone. I was seeing someone, Patricia Hernandez, and she was worth every penny of her $400 hourly rate. The evidence gathering was meticulous. Bank statements going back years. Email chains where my mother casually mentioned my social security number for insurance purposes. Text messages where Robert asked for my banking passwords to help with your taxes. Every red flag I'd ignored, every boundary I'd let them cross, it was all there in black and white. This is good, Patricia said, reviewing my documentation. Really good. But I need to warn you, once we file, there's no going back. This will likely result in criminal charges. I understand. Do you? Because your stepfather could face jail time. Your mother could be charged as an accomplice. Are you prepared for that? I thought about all the dinners I'd eaten alone in my studio apartment, too broke to go out after paying their bills. I thought about the vacations I'd never taken, the relationships that had withered because I was always too stressed about money to be fully present. I thought about the spreadsheet that showed I'd given them $128,000 over 12 years. Enough for a house down payment. Enough for a better life. Enough for the freedom I'd never allowed myself. I'm prepared, I said. Patricia nodded. Then let's discuss the nuclear option. You mentioned they've been claiming you as a dependent on their taxes. They had. Another discovery from my financial deep dive. For 3 years, Robert had listed me as a dependent to get a larger refund, even though I hadn't lived with them for over a decade. It was tax fraud, pure and simple. The IRS offers whistleblower rewards, Patricia explained. Up to 30% of the recovered amount. Given what you've shown me, we're looking at significant back taxes, penalties, and interest. The number she quoted made me dizzy. It was more than I made in a year. But the money wasn't the point. The point was consequences. For once in their lives, Robert and my mother would face actual consequences. That Friday, 2 weeks after Tessa's birthday dinner, my mother showed up at my office. Security called up to warn me, and I watched on the lobby camera feed as she argued with the guard. Her designer purse, one I'd probably paid for, clutched dramatically to her chest. "I'm her mother," she kept insisting. "This is a family emergency." The only emergency was that their cash cow had finally run dry. I had security escort her out. She left sobbing, mascara running down her cheeks. Several of my coworkers saw the scene, and I felt the familiar burn of embarrassment. But underneath it was something new, relief. That weekend, I went apartment hunting. Not because I needed to move, my studio was fine, but because I could. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't mentally calculating how much I'd need to keep in reserve for the next family crisis. My money was actually mine. I found a one-bedroom in a better neighborhood, with actual closet space and a balcony overlooking a small park. The rent was only $200 more than my studio, but in the past, that would have been $200 I couldn't spare. "I'll take it," I told the landlord. While packing, I found the tampon box where I'd hidden cash as a teenager. Inside was $340 in crumpled bills. My escape fund that had never been enough to actually escape. I smoothed out each bill, remembering the shifts I'd worked, the lunches I'd skipped, the freedom I'd dreamed of. Now I had that freedom, but it had come at a price I was still calculating. Tessa texted while I was packing. "Mom says you're being a bitch. Dad might lose his job VC of you. Hope you're happy." I stared at the message for a long moment. Dad, she called him Dad. This man who'd stolen from both of us. But she was 18 now, an adult who'd made her choice. She'd sat there and watched him hit me. Had smiled and whispered to her boyfriend like it was dinner theater. I typed back, "I am happy." For the first time in years. Good luck at college. Then I blocked her. The moving truck was scheduled for next Saturday. Patricia would file the paperwork on Monday. The IRS would begin their investigation within the month. The wheels I'd set in motion couldn't be stopped now, even if I wanted to stop them, and I didn't want to stop them. That night, in my soon-to-be former studio, I opened a bottle of wine. Good wine, not the cheap stuff I usually bought, and updated my spreadsheet one last time. At the bottom, I added a new column, amount recovered. It was still at 0, but it wouldn't stay that way. For 12 years, I'd paid the price for their love. Now, it was time for them to pay it back. With interest. Moving day came with an unexpected spectator. I was carrying boxes down to the truck when I spotted Robert's silver Lexus, the one I'd co-signed for 2 years ago, parked across the street. He sat behind the wheel, watching me with the kind of focused intensity that made my skin crawl. I ignored him and kept loading boxes. 20 minutes later, my mother joined him in the passenger seat. They sat there for 3 hours, occasional cigarette smoke drifting from Robert's cracked window, as if their presence alone might guilt me into stopping the move. Into dropping the charges. Into resuming my role as the family ATM. My new apartment building had better security. A doorman, key card access, cameras in the lobby. It cost more, but Patricia had advised me to upgrade my safety measures. People get unpredictable when money's involved, she'd warned, especially family. The legal papers were served the following Monday. Patricia had suggested having them delivered to Robert's workplace for maximum impact and to ensure he couldn't claim he never received them. I wasn't there to see his face, but I heard about it later from a former coworker who still talked to someone at Robert's company. He went ballistic, she told me over coffee, screaming about ungrateful children and conspiracies. Security had to escort him out. He's on administrative leave pending investigation. The investigation was the key. Once banks and credit companies know fraud is involved, they dig deep. Every suspicious transaction, every forged signature, every lie comes to light. And Robert had been sloppy, arrogant in his certainty that I'd never fight back. My mother tried a different approach. She started sending emails, long, rambling messages that alternated between nostalgic memories and veiled threats. "Remember when you were 7 and had pneumonia? I stayed up all night with you, putting cold washcloths on your forehead. I never left your side. Your father left us with nothing. Nothing. Robert saved us. He took us in when no one else would. You're destroying our lives. Tessa won't even come out of her room. She might not go to college now because of you. I know where you work. I know your routines. You can't hide forever. I forwarded every email to Patricia. Documentation was everything. Now, the financial forensics revealed more than even I had expected. Not only had Robert been stealing from me, he'd been running similar scams on two elderly neighbors, convincing them to add him to their accounts to help with bills. He'd taken one for $15,000, the other for $22,000. This changes things, Patricia explained. With multiple victims, the DA will definitely pursue criminal charges. Elder financial abuse is a felony. I felt sick. How many others had there been? How many people had Robert charmed and robbed while I was enabling him by covering his family expenses? 3 weeks into the legal process, I experienced my first real victory. The credit bureaus removed all the fraudulent accounts from my report. My score, which had plummeted to 580, jumped back to 745. It was just numbers on a screen, but I cried when I saw it. Years of careful building, destroyed in weeks, now restored with the stroke of a judge's pen. The restraining order came next. After the emails escalated and Robert was caught on my new building's cameras trying to talk his way past the doorman, Patricia fast-tracked the protective order. The hearing was the first time I'd seen my mother since she'd showed up at my office. She'd aged 10 years in a month. Her usually perfect hair hung limp. Her designer clothes replaced with an ill-fitting pantsuit. She wouldn't look at me, keeping her eyes fixed on her lawyer, a public defender, since they couldn't afford Patricia's equivalent. Robert wasn't there. He'd been arrested the night before on the elder fraud charges and was sitting in county jail, unable to make bail. Without my income or the money he'd stolen, they were broke. Your Honor, my mother's lawyer began. My client is this young woman's mother. Surely a restraining order between parent and child is excessive. Your client, the judge interrupted, reviewing. The file is named as an accomplice in multiple counts of identity theft and fraud. The emails submitted show a clear pattern of harassment and escalating threats. The order is granted. 500 feet. They couldn't come within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. It was a circle of safety, legally enforced. As we left the courthouse, my mother finally looked at me. For a second, her mask slipped, and I saw pure hatred in her eyes. Not disappointment, not hurt, hatred. As if I was the one who'd stolen, who'd lied, who'd drained her dry. I hope you're happy, she hissed. I'm getting there, I replied. The IRS moved slower than the criminal courts, but Patricia assured me they were thorough. The audit notice arrived at my mother's house, my former home, in late May. 3 years of fraudulent returns claiming me as a dependent, plus Robert's unreported income from his various scams, plus penalties and interest. The total they owed was staggering. Tessa graduated high school the first week of June. I knew because her Instagram was still public, filled with photos of her in cap and gown. My mother stood beside her in one photo, smile strained, looking gaunt, and a dress I recognized from 5 years ago. Robert was notably absent, still in jail, awaiting trial. I felt a pang looking at those photos. Tessa looked young, scared beneath her smile. College was probably off the table now. At least the expensive state school she'd planned on. Community college and student loans would be her reality, the same reality I'd faced at her age, but for different reasons. Part of me wanted to reach out to offer, what? Money? I almost laughed at the thought. The cycle, trying to perpetuate itself already. No. Tessa had made her choice that night at the restaurant. She'd have to live with the consequences, just like I had. My therapy sessions with Dr. Marcus became a lifeline during this period. You're grieving, she observed during one session. Not for who they were, but for who he wanted them to be. She was right. I mourned the mother who'd never existed, the one who would have protected me instead of serving me up to keep her husband happy. I mourned the sister who might have been, if she hadn't been taught from birth that I was the hired help. I even mourned the life I might have had, the savings, the travel, the peace of mind, if I hadn't spent 12 years lighting myself on fire to keep them warm. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, stayed late, volunteered for presentations. My boss, Sarah, noticed the change. "You seem different," she said during my quarterly review. "More confident, more present." "I've had some personal changes," I admitted. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. We're promoting you to senior manager." The pay increase was substantial. The number she quoted was more than I'd ever made, more than Robert had ever made, even with his inflated claims about his sales prowess. I signed the paperwork with hands that barely shook. That night, I went out to celebrate. Alone, but not lonely. I sat at the bar of an upscale restaurant, the kind of place I'd never have gone before, too worried about saving money for the next family emergency. I ordered a good steak and better wine. "Celebrating something?" the bartender asked. "My independence," I said, raising my glass. He smiled and poured himself a shot of water. "To independence." We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. No guilt attached, no worry about what it would cost me later. Just happiness, clean and bright as the wine in my glass. The emails from my mother had stopped after the restraining order. But others had taken up the cause. Distant relatives, family, friends, even my old high school guidance counselor reached out. All with versions of "family is everything" and "you'll regret this someday." I didn't respond to any of them. They hadn't been there for the midnight calls about money. They hadn't watched my bank account drain month after month. They hadn't felt the sting of Robert's hand or the weight of my mother's calculated blindness. Let them judge. I was done explaining myself to people who'd already chosen their side. Patricia called with updates regularly. Robert's public defender was trying to plea bargain, but with multiple victims and a clear pattern of fraud, the DA wasn't interested in deals. Trial was set for September. "You'll need to testify," Patricia warned. Are you ready for that? Was I? To sit in a courtroom and detail 12 years of financial abuse? To look Robert in the eye and tell the truth he'd always denied? To watch my mother's face as I explained how they'd systematically destroyed my trust along with my credit? "I'm ready," I said. And I was. The birthday card arrived in July, 2 months after my move. It was forwarded from my old address, my mother's handwriting shaky on the redirected envelope. Inside, a generic Hallmark message about daughters in love, with her signature at the bottom. No personal note, no mention of everything that had happened, just her name. And tucked inside, a photo. It was from Tessa's 5th birthday party. I was 19, home from college for the weekend, holding a giggling Tess on my hip while she smeared chocolate cake on my cheek. We were both laughing. I looked young, hopeful, unaware that I was already 3 years into paying for their lives. I stared at the photo for a long time, then placed it in my desk drawer. Not in the trash, but not on display either. Some things deserve to be remembered, even if they hurt. August brought the trial prep. Patricia's office became my second home as we reviewed 12 years of evidence, bank statements, emails, text messages, recorded phone calls. My obsessive documentation was about to pay off. "You're my favorite kind of client," Patricia said one afternoon, reviewing my files. "Organized, thorough, and angry enough to see this through." "I'm not angry," I protested. She looked at me over her glasses. "You should be. They stole more than money from you. They stole years of your life." She was right. I was angry, furious, actually. But it was a cold fury now, crystallized into purpose. They'd taken enough. Not 1 penny more. The week before the trial, I had an unexpected visitor at work. Tessa stood in the lobby, looking smaller than her 18 years in a sundress I didn't recognize. Security called up, and I debated refusing to see her, but curiosity won. We met in the public cafe on the ground floor. Safe, neutral territory, with plenty of witnesses. "You look good," she said, fidgeting with her iced coffee. "The promotion suits you." "How did you know about that?" "LinkedIn. I've been keeping track." We sat in silence for a moment. Up close, I could see the stress in her face, dark circles, bitten nails, the kind of thinness that comes from anxiety rather than diet. "Why are you here, Tessa?" I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." About the restaurant. About everything. I waited. Sorry was a start, but it wasn't enough. "I've been thinking," she continued, "about all those years. You were always there, always helping, and I just took advantage. She flinched, but nodded. Mom says you're being vindictive, that you're trying to destroy us. But I've been going through old photos, old emails. You paid for everything, didn't you? My dance classes, my school trips, even my prom dress. Yes. Why? It was such a simple question, but the answer was complicated. Because you were a kid. Because it wasn't your fault. Because I thought if I gave enough, eventually I'd get something back. Love. Respect would have been enough. She started crying then. Ugly sobs that drew stares from other patrons. I handed her napkins and waited. I'd cried enough of my own tears. I could weather hers. I testified yesterday, she said when she could speak again. For the prosecution. About the birthday dinner. About things I overheard. About Dad. Robert bragging about using your information. This was news. Patricia hadn't mentioned Tessa was cooperating. That must have been hard. He's been lying to us for years, taking money from other people, too. Mom knew. She had to know. Tessa wiped her eyes. I got into state university, but I can't go. No money, and no one will co-sign loans because of all this. I'm taking a gap year, working at Target. The old me would have offered to help. Would have reached for my checkbook to fix it, to ease her pain. But I kept my hands folded on the table. Community college is a good option, I said instead. That's where I started. Transfer after 2 years. It's cheaper, and you'll get the same degree. You're not going to help me. It wasn't a question, and I respected her more for not making it one. No, I'm not. Not with money. But if you want advice about financial aid, scholarships, building credit, I can offer that. She nodded, gathering her dignity. That's fair. More than fair, probably. We talked for another 20 minutes. Not about the trial or the family, but about practical things, budgeting, FAFSA applications, work-study programs. The kind of guidance I'd had to figure out alone at her age. When she left, she paused at the door. Lena, that night at the restaurant, I should have said something when he hit you. I was scared, but that's not an excuse. I'm sorry. Thank you, I said, and meant it. That weekend, I did something I'd been putting off. I went through the physical reminders of my old life. Boxes of photos, birthday cards, the world's best sister mug Tessa had given me when she was 7. Each item was a small grief, a moment when I believed things might get better. I kept a few things. The mug, because it reminded me of the hopeful child Tessa had been. A photo of my college graduation where I stood alone because my family had been too busy to attend. A card my mother had given me when I got my first job, back when she still seemed proud of me. The rest went into the donation bin. Someone else could use the picture frames, the knickknacks, the costume jewelry my mother had regifted to me over the years. I didn't need artifacts from a life I was leaving behind. The trial started on a Tuesday. I wore my best suit, the charcoal one I'd bought for important client meetings. Patricia met me outside the courthouse, briefcase in hand and warface on. Remember, she said, stick to the facts. Don't editorialize. Let the evidence speak for itself. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Robert sat at the defense table wearing an ill-fitting suit and the expression of a man who'd finally run out of people to con. He'd lost weight in jail, his face gaunt, that commanding presence reduced to nothing. My mother sat in the gallery front row. She wore black as if in mourning, clutching tissues she never actually used. When I took the stand, our eyes met briefly. I searched for something, remorse, understanding, even honest hatred, but there was only the same calculated blankness she'd perfected over the years. Testifying was easier than I'd expected. Patricia had prepared me well, and the prosecutor walked me through the evidence methodically. Bank statements appeared on screens. Emails were read into the record. That comprehensive spreadsheet displayed for the jury to see. Can you tell us the total amount you gave to the defendants over 12 years? $128,743, I said clearly. Not including interest on credit cards they opened in my name or opportunities one missed because I couldn't afford them. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a bitter woman seeking revenge. He highlighted my good salary, my promotion, suggested I could afford to help family in need. Isn't it true you voluntarily gave these funds? No one forced you. Financial coercion is still force, I replied. When you're told your sister won't eat unless you pay. When you're blamed for every hardship. When helping is the only way to maintain any relationship with your family. Yes, that's force. He pushed harder, but the evidence was overwhelming. The credit cards opened without permission. The tax fraud. The elderly neighbors Robert had robbed. It painted a picture of systematic, deliberate crime. I was on the stand for 3 hours. When I finally stepped down, I felt empty, but clean. Like I'd lanced an infection that had been poisoning me for years. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Robert's face when they read the verdict was something I'll never forget. The moment a man who'd always talked his way out of consequences realized the bill had finally come due. Sentencing would come later, but the prosecutor estimated 3 to 5 years, plus restitution. My mother wasn't charged as an accomplice. Insufficient evidence of direct participation. But she'd lost everything anyway. The house, the car, the lifestyle built on my exhaustion and others' trust. Outside the courthouse, Patricia shook my hand. You did good. How do you feel? Free, I said. She smiled. That's the point. The money you'll get from restitution and the IRS whistleblower claim? That's just bonus. The real win is getting your life back. That night, I sat in my apartment, my safe, quiet apartment, and opened a bottle of champagne. I'd bought it the day I filed charges, saving it for this moment. The cork popped with a satisfying sound, and I poured a glass, toasting to no one but myself. My phone sat silent on the counter. No guilt trip calls, no emergency texts, no demands disguised as requests. Just peaceful, blessed silence. I thought about Tessa starting her job at Target next week. About my mother probably staying with one of those relatives who'd said family was everything. About Robert sitting in a cell, no one left to manipulate. They'd all made their choices. Now they were living with them. And for the first time in my adult life, so was I, September arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made everything feel possible. I'd been living in silence for 3 weeks. No family drama, no crisis calls, no emotional manipulation disguised as love. Just the normal rhythm of work, sleep, and slowly learning who I was without the weight of other people's expectations. Then Patricia called with news that would change everything. The IRS investigation is complete, she said. Are you sitting down? I was at my desk, reviewing quarterly reports. Should I be? The whistleblower claim was approved. With back taxes, penalties, and interest from 3 years of fraudulent returns, plus unreported income from Robert's various schemes, the total recovery is $247,000. Your portion is 30%. I did the math automatically. $74,100. Not a fortune, but more than I'd ever had at once. More than I'd given them in some years. There's more, Patricia continued. The criminal restitution hearing is next week. The judge will order Robert to repay what he stole, including the elderly neighbors. You're first in line as a creditor. How much from the fraudulent credit cards and identity theft? $31,000. Whether you'll ever see it is another question, but it'll follow him for life. No bankruptcy discharge for criminal. Restitution. After I hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen. The numbers meant less than I'd expected. What mattered was what they represented. Validation. Proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't selfish, wasn't the ungrateful daughter they'd painted me as. The system had looked at the evidence and sided with me. That weekend, I did something I'd been afraid to do for months. I checked Tessa's social media. Her Instagram had gone private, but her LinkedIn was public. She'd started at Target, but her profile also mentioned weekend classes at community college, business administration major. I felt a flicker of pride. She was figuring it out, the hard way, like I had. My mother's Facebook was still public, probably because she didn't know how to change the settings. The carefully curated life was gone. No more restaurant check-ins or shopping hauls. The most recent post was a shared article about forgiveness, with her comment, "Some people can hold grudges forever. I choose love and light." The comments below were a masterclass in enabling. Stay strong, Linda. Family troubles are so hard. Prayers. Your daughter will regret this one day. I almost laughed. Love and light, but only when it didn't cost her anything. The restitution hearing was brief. Robert appeared in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. The federal charges meant he'd been transferred to a higher security facility. He kept his eyes down as the judge read the order, $31,000 to me, $37,000 total to the elderly neighbors. Payment plans to begin upon release. My mother wasn't there. Small mercies. October brought unexpected changes. Sarah, my boss, pulled me into her office for a conversation I didn't see coming. "We're opening a new branch in Chicago," she said. "I want you to run it. Full relocation package, significant salary increase, and a chance to build your own team. Chicago. 800 miles from here. From them. From every restaurant and street corner that held memories I wanted to forget. When do you need an answer?" "Take a week. This is a big decision." But it wasn't really. I accepted the next day. The move happened fast. The company hired professional packers, arranged temporary housing, even flew me out for a long weekend to look at apartments. I chose a high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Lake Michigan. It cost 3 times my old studio, but I could afford it now. Not just financially, but emotionally. I deserved nice things. I deserved a view. My last week in town, I had one final visitor. Dr. Marcus had agreed to see me for an extra session before I transferred to a colleague in Chicago. "How are you feeling about the move?" she asked. Relieved. Excited. A little guilty. Guilty for being happy, for not feeling worse about how things ended. Shouldn't I be grieving more? Dr. Marcus smiled. "You've been grieving for years. For the family you should have had, the support you deserved, the life you might have lived. The fact that you can feel joy now? That's not something to feel guilty about. That's healing." She was right. I'd done my grieving in real time, spread over 12 years of disappointment. This wasn't the sharp pain of fresh loss. It was the dull ache of accepting what had always been true. They'd never loved me the way I'd loved them. And that was okay. It had to be. My going-away party at work was small but warm. Colleagues I'd kept at arm's length for years suddenly felt like the family I'd chosen. They gave me a Cubs jersey and a deep-dish pizza cookbook, joking that I'd need to learn the local customs. Marcus from accounting pulled me aside. "I'm glad you're getting out," he said quietly. "Fresh starts are underrated." Speaking from experience, left my entire family in Texas 10 years ago. Best decision I ever made. Blood doesn't make family. Choice does. The night before my flight, I did a final check of my old apartment. Everything was gone except the echo of my footsteps on hardwood floors. I stood at the window where I'd watched my mother and Robert in their car that day, trying to intimidate me into compliance. They'd lost. Not just in court, but in the larger battle for my life. They'd wanted me small, grateful, perpetually giving. Instead, I was leaving bigger, freer, and finally putting myself first. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Lena." The voice was thin, aged. It took me a moment to recognize Aunt Helen. "I'm calling about your mother." "I can't help her. She's sick. Really sick this time. Cancer. She needs." I hung up. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd paid for her choices and Robert's and even Tessa's. For over a decade. The Bank of Lena was permanently closed. The flight to Chicago was bumpy, but I didn't mind. Turbulence felt appropriate for a life change this big. I pressed my face to the window as the city appeared below, massive, sprawling, full of possibility. My temporary housing was a furnished corporate apartment in the Loop. I arrived at sunset, the sky painting the buildings gold and pink. After the driver left, I stood at the window, 30 floors up, watching the city pulse with life below. I was alone. No family within hundreds of miles. No one who knew my history, my old role as the family savior. I could be anyone here. I could be myself, whoever that turned out to be. That night, I ordered Thai food from a place down the street. When the delivery guy asked if I was new to the building, I said yes. "Welcome to Chicago," he said with a genuine smile. "You're going to love it here." As I ate my pad thai in my corporate apartment, surrounded by boxes and possibility, I thought about the IRS check that would arrive soon, about the job that started Monday, about the life I was building on my own terms. The old me would have felt guilty for not sharing this good fortune. Would have calculated how much I could send home, how much suffering I could alleviate. But the old me had died in that restaurant, with the taste of blood in her mouth and her cheeks stinging from a slap she'd never seen coming. This new me? She was keeping every penny. She was building a future. She was choosing herself. Finally and completely. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Without reading it, I blocked it and set the phone aside. Whatever crisis was brewing back home, it wasn't mine to solve. Outside, Chicago glittered like a promise. Tomorrow, I'd start exploring my new neighborhood. Next week, I'd start my new job. Next month, maybe I'd even try dating again, without the baggage of family drama hanging over every conversation. But tonight, I just sat in my window and watched the city lights, feeling something I hadn't experienced in over a decade: peace. The bill had finally been paid. Not by them. They'd never truly pay for what they'd taken, but by me. In years of therapy, in difficult boundaries, in the courage to walk away from people who'd convinced me their love depended on my usefulness. It was expensive, that freedom. But sitting there in my new city, with my new life spread before me like an unwritten check, I knew one thing for certain: it was worth every penny. The Chicago winter hit with a vengeance I wasn't prepared for. By December, the wind off Lake Michigan felt like tiny knives against any exposed skin. But I loved it. The cold felt clean. Honest. Nothing like the suffocating warmth of family gatherings where everyone pretended things were fine. My new office was on the 40th floor of a building in the financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, and a team of 12 people who looked to me for leadership. The first few weeks were a blur of meetings, strategic planning, and proving I deserved the position. "You're different from what I expected," one of my analysts, James, said after a particularly intense budget meeting. "How so?" "Most new directors come in trying to change everything immediately. You actually listen." I'd learned the hard way that really hearing people, not just waiting for your turn to talk, was a rare skill. All those years of reading between the lines of my family's demands had taught me to pay attention to what wasn't being said. The IRS check arrived on a Tuesday in early December. I deposited it immediately, then sat in my car staring at the bank receipt: $74,100. More money than I'd ever seen at once. In the past, a windfall like this would have triggered a dozen family emergencies. Now, it was just mine. I met with a financial advisor the next week. "What are your goals?" she asked. "Security," I said without hesitation. "I want to know I'll never be vulnerable again." We set up a diversified portfolio, some conservative investments, some growth-focused, all designed to ensure I'd never have to depend on anyone else. It felt like building a fortress out of numbers and compound interest. Christmas approached with all the subtlety of a freight train. Store windows glittered with family scenes, commercials preached togetherness, and my inbox filled with holiday party invitations. I accepted them all. Why not? I had nowhere else to be. At the company Christmas party, held at an upscale hotel, I found myself actually enjoying the festivities. My team had exceeded fourth-quarter projections, and Sarah had flown in from headquarters to celebrate. "You've transformed this branch," she said over champagne. "I knew you were the right choice. Thank you for taking a chance on me." It wasn't a chance. It was a calculation, and it paid off. As midnight approached, my phone buzzed with a notification. I'd been dreading a Facebook memory. 5 years ago, a family Christmas photo where I stood slightly apart from the others, my smile not quite reaching my eyes, while Robert's hand rested possessively on my mother's shoulder and Tessa opened presents I'd paid for. I deleted the app entirely. Some memories weren't worth keeping. January brought something unexpected, a letter forwarded from my old address. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky but familiar. Inside, a single sheet of notebook paper. "Lena, I'm writing this from Springfield Women's Correctional. Got 18 months for check fraud. Guess Robert wasn't the only one who got caught. I know you won't read this, but I need to say it anyway. I was a terrible mother. I chose him over you every time. I told myself I was keeping the family together, but really, I was just scared of being alone again. I let him hurt you because it was easier than standing up to him. You deserved better. You deserved a mother who protected you instead of serving you up like a sacrifice. I see that now. Too late. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. I just needed you to know that I know what I did, what I didn't do. Take care of yourself the way I never did. Linda. I read it 3 times, waiting to feel something. Satisfaction, vindication, sorrow. But there was only a hollow acknowledgement. She knew. She'd always known. That almost made it worse. I filed the letter with my other legal documents and moved on. February brought better surprises. I joined a hiking group, indoor rock climbing during winter, and met people who knew nothing about my past. There was freedom in that, in being just Lena, who worked in finance and couldn't quite master belaying knots. You're too much in your head, Marcus, a teacher from Lincoln Park, said during one climbing session. Trust your body. It knows what to do. It was good advice for more than climbing. The restitution payments started arriving in March. $200 a month, automatically deducted from Robert's prison work program earnings. It would take decades to pay off at that rate, but the principle mattered more than the money. Every month, a small reminder that actions had consequences. I used the first payment to buy myself something I'd always wanted but never felt I deserved, a really good winter coat. Cashmere and wool, tailored to fit perfectly. Warm enough to make Chicago winters bearable. It cost more than my old monthly grocery budget, and I didn't feel guilty for a second. April marked 1 year since the birthday dinner. I'd planned to let the anniversary pass unnoticed. But my Chicago therapist, Dr. Winters, had other ideas. Anniversaries of trauma can be powerful, she said. Ignoring them doesn't make them go away. What if you reclaimed this date? So on April 15th, I threw myself a party. Nothing fancy, just dinner at a good restaurant with my climbing friends, my work team, and the handful of Chicago people who'd become my chosen family. We ate too much, drank good wine, and nobody slapped me when the check came. What are we celebrating? James asked as I raised a toast. Freedom, I said. And really good friends. They cheered and clinked glasses, not needing to know the whole story to celebrate with me. That was the beauty of chosen family. They showed up without requiring payment. As I walked home that night, slightly tipsy and genuinely happy, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from home. Hello, Lena? It's me, Tessa. I stopped walking. We hadn't spoken since that day at the cafe. How did you get this number? LinkedIn. I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted you to know. I got my associate degree. Graduated with honors. I'm transferring to state in the fall with a full scholarship. That's wonderful, Tessa. Really? I've been working 2 jobs and taking extra classes. It's been hard, but I get it now. Why you were always so tired. Why you saved every penny. I get it. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, gathering courage. I also wanted to tell you that Mom's out. She's living with Aunt Helen in Florida. And Robert, he got another 5 years. Tried to run this same scam in prison, if you can believe it. I could believe it. Leopards and spots and all that. Are you okay? I asked. With money, I mean? School. I'm figuring it out. Loans, work-study, scholarships. The hard way, like you did. She paused. I'm not asking for money. I wanted you to know I'm okay. And that I'm sorry for everything. I know you are. Maybe someday, when I graduate, when I've made something of myself, maybe we could have coffee. Not as family. Just as people who knew each other once. I considered it. The old Lena would have said yes immediately, would have offered to fly her out, pay for dinner, rebuild the bridge they'd burned. But this Lena had learned the value of maybe. Maybe, I said. Ask me again when you graduate. I will. Take care, Lena. You too. After we hung up, I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, letting the April wind cut through my expensive coat. Tessa would be okay. She'd learned the hard lessons early, but she'd learned them. Maybe that was its own kind of gift. I started walking again, heading home to my high-rise apartment with its lake view and doorman and blessed distance from everyone who'd ever made me feel small. My phone stayed quiet in my pocket. No crisis calls, no guilt trips, no demands disguised as love. Just silence. Beautiful, expensive, hard-won silence. The price of freedom, I'd learned, wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in the courage to say no, the strength to walk away, and the wisdom to know that some bills should never be paid. And that was a currency I'd finally learned to save. The invitation arrived in June, printed on cardstock so thick it felt like a declaration of war. My cousin Rachel was getting married, the same Rachel who'd sent me 3 paragraphs about family forgiveness after the trial. The same Rachel who'd borrowed $500 for textbooks and never mentioned it again. You're invited to celebrate the union of Rachel Marie Hendress and David Paul Morrison. At the bottom, in handwriting I recognized as Aunt Helen's, hope you can make it. Your mother will be there. Time heals all wounds. I RSVP'd no and sent a crystal vase from the registry. Let them talk about my absence. I'd rather be the villain in their story than a character in it at all. Work had become my sanctuary. The Chicago branch was thriving. We'd landed 3 major accounts and expanded the team to 20 people. I'd implemented flex hours and mental health days, remembering all too well what it felt like to drag yourself to work after a night of family crisis calls. You run this place differently, observed Priya, my newest hire. Like you actually care if we're okay. Because I do, I said simply. Burnt-out employees don't do good work. Take care of yourselves first. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was giving my team the consideration I'd never given myself. July brought unexpected news through LinkedIn. Robert's company, his former company, had gone under. Turns out he'd been running similar scams there, inflating sales numbers and skimming from expense accounts. The investigation had uncovered years of fraud. Several employees had lost their retirement savings invested in company stock. I felt sick reading about it. How many red flags had I missed? How many victims had there been while I was enabling his lifestyle? Patricia called that afternoon. Saw the news. You okay? I keep thinking about all those people he hurt while I was paying his bills. Stop. His choices aren't your responsibility. You were a victim, too. I know. It's just survivor's guilt. Common in financial abuse cases. The question is, what are you going to do with it? What I did was donate $10,000 to a financial literacy program for young adults aging out of foster care. Kids who, like me at 18, had no one to teach them about credit scores and compound interest and the danger of family members who saw them as ATMs. It wasn't penance. It was purpose. August in Chicago meant street festivals and outdoor concerts. I developed a routine: farmers market on Saturdays, yoga on Sundays, dinner with friends at least twice a week. It was the life I'd imagined during all those nights eating cereal alone, too broke for real groceries after paying their rent. One evening at a rooftop bar with my climbing group, Marcus asked about my family. They're around here, you know. We're estranged. I'm sorry. I'm not. The words came out sharper than intended. Sorry, it's just, not every family is worth keeping. Amen to that, said Julia, raising her beer. I haven't talked to my dad in 6 years. Best decision ever. The conversation shifted to other topics, but I felt something ease in my chest. Here were people who understood that sometimes walking away was the healthiest choice. That DNA didn't obligate you to endless sacrifice. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in September. My phone rang 3 times before I answered, groggy and disoriented. Miss Walsh, this is Mercy General Hospital. You're listed as Linda Walsh's emergency contact. My mother. Of course. I was still her emergency contact. Of course, she'd never updated it. What happened? She's had a heart attack. She's stable, but asking for you. I sat up, fully awake now. She's in Florida. No, ma'am. She's here in Chicago. Arrived yesterday, apparently. The floor felt unsteady beneath my feet. She'd come here. To my city. My safe space. I'll be there in the morning. She's quite insistent. Morning, I repeated, and hung up. I didn't go back to sleep. Instead, I sat at my window, watching the sunrise paint Lake Michigan gold and pink. She'd had a heart attack. She was alone. She was asking for me. Old patterns whispered. Go now. She needs you. What if she dies? You'll never forgive yourself, Asterisk, but Dr. Winters had taught me to examine those whispers. Whose voice was that? Not mine. It was the voice of a 14-year-old who'd been trained to drop everything for family emergencies. The voice of a 20-something who'd skipped meals to pay their bills. I went to work first, handled 2 meetings, responded to emails, ate a proper lunch. Only then did I drive to the hospital. She looked smaller in the hospital bed. Older. The designer clothes replaced by a hospital gown, the perfect hair now gray at the roots. Without her armor of appearance, she was just a frightened woman who'd built her life on a foundation of other people's money. "You came," she whispered. "The hospital called. I mean, to Chicago. I've been here 3 days, working up the courage to contact you." "Why?" She closed her eyes. "Helen kicked me out. Said she couldn't afford me anymore." Imagine that. Can't afford me. "What do you want, Mom?" "I don't know, to see you. To explain. To ask." She stopped herself. Even now, even like this, she couldn't quite bring herself to ask directly. "I'm not giving you money." "I know. I'm not letting you stay with me." "I know." "Then what?" She opened her eyes, and for the first time in my life, I saw her clearly. Not the victim she'd always played, not the enabler she'd become, but the frightened woman who'd chosen security over her daughter and lived to regret it. "I wanted to see who you became without us. And you're." She gestured weakly at my suit, my posture, the confidence I wore like armor. "You're magnificent. I just wanted you to know that I see it. What you built, what you became despite us." I stayed for an hour. We didn't reconcile. There was no tearful forgiveness, no promises to do better. Just 2 women who'd shared a house once, talking carefully around the crater between them. Before I left, I did one thing. I updated her emergency contact to Aunt Helen and left my business card with the floor nurse. "If she can't pay," I said quietly, "bill me for the difference. Just this once, just the hospital." The nurse nodded. She'd seen this dance before. I drove back to my office slowly, working through what I felt. Not guilt, not obligation. Something cleaner. The ability to help without hurting myself. To give from surplus, not survival. That evening, I called Patricia. I saw her. My mother. "She's in the hospital." "How was it?" "Like visiting someone I used to know. Like closure." "Good." "That's good, Lena." After we hung up, I pulled out the leather journal Dr. Winters had suggested I keep. I wrote, "Today I learned the difference between helping and enabling. One comes from strength, the other from fear. I spent 12 years operating from fear. Today, just for today, I chose strength." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Without reading it, I deleted it. Whatever crisis was brewing now, whoever needed what, it would have to wait. I had dinner plans with friends, a presentation to finish, a life to live. The bill for my past had been paid in full. The only account that mattered now was the one I was building for my future. Deposit by careful deposit, boundary by blessed boundary. And that account, that one would never be overdrawn again. October arrived with its crisp air and changing leaves. I'd settled into my Chicago life completely now. My apartment felt like home. My team at work operated like a well-oiled machine, and I'd even started dating someone. Marcus from the climbing gym had finally asked me to dinner, and I'd surprised myself by saying yes. But October also brought the final phase of my plan, the one I'd been preparing for months without fully admitting it to myself. It started with an email to Patricia. "I want to write something. A document. Not for court, just for me. Maybe for Tessa someday. A full accounting of everything." She called immediately. "Are you sure?" "Opening all that up again. I've been thinking about it since the hospital visit. They'll never really understand what they did unless someone spells it out, and I need to spell it out for my own closure." "Then do it. But protect yourself legally. No admissions of anything that could be twisted against you." I spent 3 weeks writing it. Not just the financial losses, though those were documented in excruciating detail, but the invisible costs. The therapy sessions at $150 each. The dates I'd canceled because money was tight, the promotions I'd nearly missed from stress-induced burnout, the security deposits I'd lost moving to cheaper apartments after draining savings for their emergencies. But I also documented the gifts, The strength I'd built from surviving them, the financial literacy that came from managing crises, the boundaries I'd learned to set, the family I'd chosen instead of the one I'd been given. The final document was 43 pages. I called it a full accounting, 12 years of financial and emotional debt. I printed 3 copies, one for my files, one for my lawyer, and one I mailed to my mother's last known address at Aunt Helen's house. The cover letter was brief. Mom, this is not a letter seeking reconciliation or payment. Consider it a final statement on an account that's now closed. I thought you should know the real cost of the choices we all made. I wish you well. Lena. 2 weeks later, my phone rang at work. Aunt Helen, you're a cruel girl, she started without preamble. Sending that manifesto. Your mother had another heart episode after reading it. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because it seems like you wanted to hurt her. No, Aunt Helen. I wanted her to understand. There's a difference. She's your mother, and I was her daughter. That should have meant something, too. She hung up on me. I blocked her number and went back to my spreadsheets. That weekend, clearing out old boxes in my storage unit, I found something I'd forgotten. A birthday card from my 16th birthday. Inside, in my mother's handwriting, to our responsible girl, what would we do without you? I used to think it was praise. Now I saw it for what it was, a cage built from words, designed to keep me useful and compliant. I threw it away. November brought surprising news. Tessa had started a blog about her college journey as a first-generation, self-funded student. She wrote about working overnight shifts at Target, studying in break rooms, the shame and pride of food stamps. She never mentioned me by name, but in one post she wrote, I had someone once who sacrificed everything for our family. I watched them pour their life into a bucket with no bottom. I thought that was love. Now I know love doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I'm learning to build my own heat. I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop. She was learning. Maybe that was enough. The IRS settlement check had been earning interest, but I finally decided what to do with part of it. I established a scholarship at my old state university, the Walsh Financial Independence Fund. $25,000 to start, with plans to add more each year. For students escaping financial abuse or supporting themselves after family estrangement. The first recipient was chosen in December. Maria Santos, 19, working full-time while studying accounting after her parents kicked her out for refusing an arranged marriage. No one ever believed I could do this alone, she said when we met for coffee. This scholarship, it's not just money. It's someone saying they believe in me. I do, I told her. And you're not alone. Christmas Eve found me at Marcus's apartment, helping him cook for a gathering of what he called orphan friends, people who, for various reasons, weren't with biological family for the holidays. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and roasting vegetables. Laughter spilled from the living room where someone had started a board game. You okay? Marcus asked, noticing me staring out the window. First Christmas completely apart from them. Second, actually. Last year I was too angry to feel much. This year, I turned back to him. This year, I'm just grateful. He kissed me then, tasting like the wine we'd been testing for the mulled cider. It was warm and safe and uncomplicated. Everything my old life hadn't been. The dinner was chaotic and perfect. 12 people crowded around a table meant for 6, sharing dishes from their various cultures, telling stories that didn't require careful editing. When someone asked about family traditions, I talked about the scholarship fund, about building new traditions based on lifting others up instead of tearing yourself down. That's beautiful, said Claire, who'd fled a cult in Utah, turning pain into purpose. Still working on it, I admitted. Some days are harder than others. The hard days mean you're human, Marcus said, squeezing my hand under the table. Not that you're failing. After dinner, after the games and gifts and 3 rounds of dessert, I helped with dishes. Through the kitchen window, I could see snow starting to fall. My phone had been silent all day. No guilt trips, no manufactured emergencies, no emotional manipulation wrapped in holiday wishes. Just peace. The next morning, Christmas Day, I did receive one text from Tessa. Merry Christmas, Lena. Thank you for showing me what it costs to save everyone but yourself. I'm learning to save myself first now. Maybe that's the best gift you ever gave me. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. Proof that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is show them what not to do. Proof that breaking cycles matters, even when it hurts. That afternoon, I sat in my apartment with hot chocolate and a book, watching snow blanket the city. My bank account was healthy. My credit score had fully recovered. My heart was learning to trust again. The spreadsheet documenting what I'd given my family sat in a filing cabinet, closed and final. But I'd started a new spreadsheet. This one tracking what I was building: retirement savings, investment returns, charitable donations, the scholarship fund growth. Numbers that represented not what I'd lost, but what I was creating. My phone rang. Unknown number. Chicago area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Lena Walsh. The voice was unfamiliar, elderly. This is Dorothy Chan from Mercy General Billing Department. I'm calling about your mother's account. My stomach dropped. Had she run up more bills? Found another way to. We wanted to thank you, Dorothy continued. Your mother informed us yesterday that she secured Medicaid and disability benefits. She also wanted us to know she won't be using you as a financial guarantor anymore. She was quite insistent we remove you from all paperwork. I sat down slowly. She did. Yes, dear. She said, and I quote, my daughter has paid enough. We don't often get that kind of clarity from patients about financial responsibility. I thought you should know. After I hung up, I stood at my window for a long time watching the snowfall. Maybe people could change. Maybe understanding came too late to repair relationships, but just in time to stop perpetuating damage. Maybe that was its own kind of redemption. I wouldn't be reaching out, wouldn't be reopening doors I'd fought so hard to close, but for the first time, I could wish her well and mean it. Not because she deserved it, but because carrying anger was just another kind of bill I didn't want to pay anymore. That evening, I wrote the last entry in my journal for the year. They say the best revenge is living well. But it's not revenge at all. It's freedom. Freedom to choose your own debts, your own investments, your own returns. Today, my portfolio is diverse. Financial security, chosen family, purposeful work, quiet peace. The market value, incalculable. The ROI, finally positive. Outside, Chicago glittered under fresh snow, and I was warm. 3 years later, I stood in the conference room of a downtown hotel, adjusting the microphone one last time. The Financial Independence After Abuse workshop was sold out. 50 attendees, all women, who'd found themselves trapped in cycles of financial exploitation by family members. My name is Lena Walsh, I began, and I spent 12 years and $128,000 trying to buy love that was never for sale. The room was silent, but I could see the recognition in their eyes. These were my people, the ones who'd been trained from childhood that their worth was measured in their usefulness, their love in their financial output. I told my story without euphemism: the birthday dinner, the slap, the credit fraud, the court cases. But more importantly, I told them about the after, the therapy, the boundaries, the slow rebuild of both credit score and self-worth. The hardest part wasn't the money, I said. It was accepting that the family I kept trying to save was never going to save me back. During the break, a woman approached me. Mid-20s, nervous energy, designer bag that didn't match her worn shoes. My mom's been taking my paycheck since I was 16, she whispered. Says it's for household expenses, but she hasn't worked in years. I want to stop, but she'll say I'm selfish, cold, ungrateful. Her eyes widened. Exactly. I handed her Patricia's business card. Call her. First consultation is free. And remember, you're not selfish for wanting to keep what you earn. That's literally the bare minimum of adult life. The workshop was part of a larger initiative I'd started. The scholarship fund had grown to $100,000, supporting 5 students per year. I'd written a book, The Price of Blood, Breaking Free from Financial Abuse, with all proceeds going to the fund. Corporate speaking engagements brought in more. Marcus joked that I'd turned trauma into a business model, but he supported it. We'd gotten married the previous spring. A small ceremony with our chosen family. No drama, no guilt trips, no family members measuring their love in dollar signs. You saved yourself, he'd said in his vows. And now you're teaching others to do the same. I've never loved anyone more. Tessa had graduated 6 months ago. True to her word, she'd reached out. We met for coffee on neutral ground, a Starbucks halfway between Chicago and her new job in Milwaukee. She looked good. Tired, the way all recent graduates working entry-level jobs looked. But good. Clear-eyed, present. I work in nonprofit financial counseling, she said. Helping people in poverty manage debt and build savings. Ironic, right? Or appropriate. We talked for 2 hours. Not as sisters, that ship had sailed, but as two women who'd survived the same storm from different lifeboats. When we parted, she hugged me. Thank you, she said, for showing me what not to become. I didn't promise to stay in touch, neither did she, but we exchanged LinkedIn connections. And sometimes I saw her posts about financial literacy and escaping poverty cycles. She was doing good work, making amends in her own way. Robert was still in prison. The last I'd heard, he'd been transferred to a facility in Texas. The restitution payments continued, $200 a month, as regular as clockwork. I donated them directly to the scholarship fund. Blood money transformed into opportunity. My mother had stabilized in Florida, living on disability and Medicaid in a small apartment Aunt Helen had helped her find. We hadn't spoken since the hospital, but Aunt Helen sent occasional updates I hadn't asked for. Linda was in therapy. Linda had joined a church. Linda was volunteering at a food bank. Good for Linda. It had only taken losing everything to find something real. The workshop ended at 4 o'clock. Attendees clustered in small groups, exchanging numbers and stories. I'd learned to build community into these events. Isolation was how financial abuse thrived. As I packed up, my phone buzzed with an email from my publisher. The book had hit the New York Times bestseller list for self-help. They wanted to discuss a second edition, maybe a workbook companion. 5 years ago, I couldn't afford dinner at a restaurant. Now, I was teaching others how to reclaim their financial lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. That evening, Marcus and I attended a gala for the Chicago Financial Literacy Foundation. I wore a dress that cost more than my old monthly rent and didn't feel guilty about it. At our table sat Maria Santos, my first scholarship recipient, now a CPA, working with domestic violence survivors. None of this would exist without you, she said during her speech, gesturing to the room full of donors and advocates. Lena Walsh taught me that walking away isn't giving up. It's growing up. But I knew better. It would have existed without me, in some form, because there were too many of us. The family ATMs, the emotional punching bags with good credit, the daughters and sons who confused exploitation with love. Someone would have built this. I just happened to be the one with the spreadsheets and the anger and the good lawyer. Later, as we walked home along Lake Michigan, Marcus asked, "Any regrets?" I thought about it. About birthdays spent alone and Christmases I'd missed, and a mother who'd chosen a con man over her daughter. About a sister who might have been in a different life. About $128,000 that could have been house payments or vacations or simple security. No, I said finally. Regret would mean wishing it went differently, but it had to go exactly this way for me to become who I am, and I like who I am. He squeezed my hand. So do I. At home, I checked my email one last time. Mixed in with the congratulations and workshop feedback was a message from an unknown address. The subject line read, "From someone who should have protected you." I almost deleted it. Then curiosity won. "I know I have no right to contact you. Helen says you're doing amazing things. She sent me an article about your book. I won't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I won't make excuses because there aren't any. I chose him over you over and over until there was nothing left to choose. I just wanted to say I see it now. All of it. The price you paid for my cowardice. The strength it took to stop paying. The grace in how you've turned that pain into purpose. I'm proud of you. Not that my pride matters anymore. But you should know that somewhere in Florida, your mother finally understands what she lost and what you gained by letting go. Be happy. You paid enough for all of us. Linda." I read it twice, then forwarded it to my therapist with a note for discussion next session. Then I closed my laptop and went to find my husband. We had dinner reservations at 8 o'clock. A new place that didn't take cards. Cash only. The kind of restaurant that would have terrified me once. Now it was just dinner. Just life. Just another choice I could afford to make. The bill, when it came, would be split fairly, paid in full. No hidden costs, no emotional interest, no family discount. That wasn't a discount at all. Just a clean transaction between equals, the way it always should have been. And for that, for the ability to finally freely choose, I was grateful beyond any accounting.